Welcome to Think Tank, the podcast. I'm Steve Adubato. Listen, I absolutely love this show. I love doing the TV stuff. But I got to tell you, when we do our podcast, it's a very easy, relaxed conversation for us, but more importantly, the question is, what's it like for you? And joining me in the studio, and I know she loves joining us on the podcast, is Nicole Swennerton. She's the senior producer of Think Tank, What's on TV, which is otherwise known as The Broadcast. How you doing today?
Pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing great. Why don't we let folks know, by the way, we are at East Main Media, right?
Yes, we are in Little
Brian's
Falls.
here, so he confirms that. Tell folks how they can check us out.
Sure. So to hear more Think Tank podcasts, you can subscribe on Apple iTunes or Google Play, or you can visit our website at steveadubato.org. That's Adubato. And you can follow us on Twitter at Steve Adubato and on Facebook at Steve Adubato PhD to check out all of our great content.
Good stuff. By the way, to fully disclose, which is something I like to say a lot, in the studio with us is also the senior producer of Think Tank, the podcast, Lauren Gary. Lauren, could you please at least say hello?
Hello.
Please, pipe down. This is Think Tank, the podcast. And the great things about this show is that we try to bring in different people who, you know, you say, well, they're not in the news. They're not involved in public policy. They're not in politics. But Bob Ley, who spent 40 years at ESPN, he was the first, was he not the first person on air at ESPN, Nicole?
I think he was in one of the first 2 or 3 people on SportsCenter.
1979. Okay, were you born?
No.
But you don't have to laugh. Just say no. So Bob Ley was on the air at ESPN for 40 years. He did a great show called Outside the Lines. It was not the X's and O's of sports. It was all about the politics, questions of ethics, questions of whether you should be paying college athletes, a whole range of important questions. That's what Bob Ley did for 40 years, and he's actually stepped down after all those years, which I imagine must be very difficult. Why do you think this program is so important, this podcast is so important, Nicole?
I always say that, you know, looking at sports, just like looking at any type of media or TV shows or movies, it comes down to the stories behind them. And Bob Ley and Outside the Lines and ESPN did a great job of really doing a deeper dive into the stories around sports. So not just who won last night, who lost last night, but talking about the really important issues. You know, Bob Ley had talked about the AIDS epidemic with Magic Johnson and
huge story at the time.
All things like that, all things that relate to sports, but have a bigger impact on our society. So I think he's a great journalist and did a great job on ESPN.
Let's also make the connection. You are an alum, one of the more successful alums of Seton Hall University. Bob Ley has a connection to Seton Hall.
Yes, he's a fellow Pirate. He graduated from Seton Hall too, and recently he's been back there teaching, which is really, really cool. And I know a lot of my colleagues from Seton Hall would have loved to have had him as a professor. So I think we're all a little jealous looking back, but I think he's going to do a great job if he continues on there.
Well, yeah, the thing with Bob and the thing with all of us who are in broadcasting is there is life after broadcasting, and Bob demonstrates that. And in this podcast, it's a very candid, very moving, and a very personal conversation with one of the greatest, I don't want to say simply one of the greatest sportscasters, because he's so much more than that. One of the greatest journalists of our time, Bob Ley, who started out on suburban cable back in the 70s. I was a kid, and I remember Bob was doing what he was doing, and I thought, Bob Ley's doing this. A lot of us went over to suburban cable, which later became Comcast, and then he went on to really great things, and he moved and motivated a lot of people, including our friend Bruce Beck over at WNBC, who's a sportscaster there. I'm not going to name a lot of names, just say that this podcast with Bob Ley will inspire you, not so much to go into sports or broadcasting, but to do what moves you, because for 40 years, he did what he did in a very personal way, with integrity, with character, and he's one of the best broadcasters, one of the best leaders you will ever find in our industry. This is Think Tank, the podcast with me, Steve Adubato. That's Nicole, but more importantly, this is Bob Ley. Hi, I'm Steve Adubato. This is One-on-One, coming to you from the Agnes Ferris NJTV studio in beautiful Brick City, Newark, New Jersey. It's our honor, my pleasure, to introduce an icon in our business. You like that?
No, stop it.
Bob Ley, who has been the host of Outside the Lines at ESPN for more than a few years. We're taping this show on the 27th of June. On the 26th, Bob Ley, after 40 years at ESPN, just about the first to go on the air there, back in 79, announced that you were going to step down.
Yeah, retire. And the right decision at the right time for the right reasons. And time to step back, take my life from Mach 3 to subsonic, and relax a little bit.
Interesting. For those, and hopefully, we don't know if Outside the Lines will continue.
Oh, it will.
Oh, will.
Oh, yeah.
Describe for folks, by the way, go on our website, connect to their website. What is that show? Because I've been fascinated by it for years.
It debuted in 1990. Our network went on the air in 1979. Outside the Lines began in 1990. And we look at the intersection of sports and society, the stories that are off the field, be it race, be it amateurism, be it steroid use, be it corruption, issues around the world on a daily, monthly, weekly basis. And we're given carte blanche, and we try not to abuse that. And it's taken me all over the world, and it's been fascinating.
You know, you and I had an offline conversation a couple weeks ago because you were teaching a master class at one of the universities we're very much connected to, one of our academic partners, Seton Hall University. And I've done some lecturing there as well. And I'm fascinated by leadership, as you know. You are as well. What's the connection in your mind, sports and leadership?
I think, and I see it on a daily basis. I still use the present tense. I'll slip to the past eventually. In just putting, for example, a program together in television, in sports television. It's leadership by example. It's getting a group of people to do something that's greater than they can do separately. It's getting 10 or 12 people around the table or 10 or 12 people in a locker room to sign on to a core set of values and to a common agreed goal and do that. And when you see it happen, and when you see it happen in a team, you see it in rock music. You know, the best place to sit, like when I watch the E Street Band and the Boss, is behind the band. And you know why? Because you watch them making eye contact with each other when a verbal, is called. And it's the changing off the set list. And you just watch that shared experience come through in the eyes. Same thing in sports. Same thing in television production. I'm sure you see it in your own life.
Springsteen doesn't have to talk a lot, does he? To those guys.
He wants to call the song Two Hearts. He goes like this to the heart. Or you'll see them each turn to each other. They'll know. And that's teamwork, that's leadership. That's knowing to keep your eye on the leader, but also understanding we all have a part here. We got to be trained and ready to do it like that.
The other part of it fascinates me, and as I said, Bob is teaching a master class up at Seton Hall in sports journalism.
Right.
But when it comes to being a leader, sports, media, music, whatever, I don't care how good you think you are, if you don't have a kick-butt team with people, as Jim Collins in his book, Good to Great, likes to say, put the right people in the right seats on the bus. If you don't have the right people and they're not sitting in the right seats on the bus, I don't care how good you are, how hard you think you can work, right?
You have to give them the right goal. You have to turn them loose. You have to realize, obviously, you're dealing with some people you pat, some people you give a little firmer pat. But yes, you have to have performers. And I see this in our own field. We have a democracy around the table where there's no seniority to a good idea. I mean, I might be the host, and we might have the executive producer at the table. We might have the producer, but we have an entry-level position, the content associate, 24, 25 years of age. I cannot tell you the number of days I work there where that's the best idea. That's the
bureaucracy.
Idea. We don't have time for a bureaucracy. We're on at 1 o'clock. This is 7 in the morning. I got a show to write. That's a good idea. We all agree. What's our treatment? What's our angle? And what's going to distinguish us and make this show unique?
Let's go back. Let's talk about this. 40 years. Started in 79 and on the 26th of June, 2019. I mean, you've interviewed several presidents,
right?
Which I'm curious about in the context of being a sports anchor.
We talked to President Ford about it. May have been the best athlete to ever be in the White House. Had offers to play.
Was he at Michigan?
Michigan, great center. Lyndon Johnson used to make the joke that Jerry played too much without his helmet, but he could have signed with the 49ers. He could have signed with the Packers.
Jerry Ford?
Jerry Ford. Bush 41. Mr. Bush played in the College World Series twice. There's a famous photograph of him accepting Babe Ruth's donation of papers to Yale University.
The first Bush?
Bush
played first base for Yale?
Exactly, yeah. And interviewed him on Air Force One. He told me about playing in an all-star game in the early 90s or late 80s when he was vice president for President Reagan and getting a double off of Milt Pappas. Bush 43, George W., owned the Texas Rangers. And we did a long 2-hour show in 1998 with Bill Clinton about race and sports. You know, Clinton was often called our first black president.
Yeah.
And that was interesting. That was April of 98, about 3 months after the Lewinsky thing had all descended on America. And he was not doing any media, and the White House press was like sitting in the back watching us like hawks.
Curious about this. By the way, if you're listening on the audio side, this is Bob Ley, 40 years at ESPN now, teaching a master class at Seton Hall University. Your alma mater?
Yes.
All right, by the way,
Class of 76.
All right, Jen, do me a favor. Do you have some video of Bob speaking as we're talking about this? Would you give a commencement address?
Commencement address back in May of 2019. Great honor.
What was that like?
I tell you, it's a responsibility because I sat through a few. Both my... Well, and you
my
know...
mind's going there
yeah,
right
I know,
now.
but you know good from like, I wish it was better. And it's a responsibility because I've sat there as a parent. You want something of substance. The kids, the young adults, they want to get going on. But you also, I think when you're an alum, you feel an affinity. Certainly, you share the experience. And I spent some time on it. I was happy with it, and it seemed to be well received.
Talk a little bit about some highlights.
Yeah.
I'm going to say some names.
All right.
I want you to react, because that's 40 years.
All right.
You interviewed Pete Rose.
Several times.
Not getting in the Hall of Fame anytime soon. Did you interview Pete Rose and ask him directly about the gambling?
Oh, absolutely.
Did he lie right to your face and
sure.
said, I never bet on baseball?
On numerous occasions.
Did you know he was lying to you?
Absolutely. We knew in '89 he was lying. I talked to people who overheard bets being made. We had that in 1989. I mean, it was well known that Pete did this. Pete was an inveterate gambler on all things, and he bet on baseball, and we knew it at the time.
Let's stay on baseball for a little bit as a Yankee fan.
You are a Yankee fan. I'm going to separate myself from that statement.
Why?
I'm a Mets guy.
You admit that? How did you?
I go to meetings, but they can't wash it out of me.
Stop. Hold on. How do you be the objective journalist that you are? Yes, you express your opinion, but
Right.
it says it's commentary. I mean, what's your commentary about the Mets? How could you? They're just not a good team.
They're a dumpster fire, as you and I are talking right now. But I was at the '69 World Series at the age of 14.
Did you see Seaver pitch?
Oh, please, you're talking about my hero.
Did you see Kuzman pitch?
Absolutely.
Tug McGraw.
I saw Kuzman pitch into the 9th inning of Game 2 of the '89 or '69 series.
How much fun was that for you, 69?
Oh, Jesus. Every game I followed, every single game. Scored it off the radio, yeah.
Did you realize that you were the second team in New York and always would be?
Oh, sure. But
You
grow
liked it that way.
If you grow up in Jersey, you've got a chip on your shoulder.
And you got to pick. By the way, you grew up right around a famous ice cream joint, Holston's,
right.
where the last scene of The Sopranos. By the way,
3 blocks away.
Check out our website for countless interviews with Soprano cast members, including the last one, Michael Imperioli. Was terrific.
I'm
Played
jealous,
Christopher.
very jealous.
He was fabulous.
I'm sure.
Listen, Bob, you didn't work long enough to get to interview him. I'm joking. Okay, by the way, why do you love The Sopranos? I promise we'll come back to sports. With Bob, you can talk about anything. Go ahead.
Because it goes back to that time when it was not Jersey chic. I mean, they shot the pilot in '97. They, and of course Bruce Springsteen, brought Jersey into the chic category.
And Stephen Van Zandt?
Oh my gosh,
he was right in there.
Going to see him in concert shortly with the Disciples of Soul. But it was so true to the ethos of Jersey. Chase did such a good job with the geography.
David Chase, right.
I went to school with 300 Carmelas, you know. Probably dated
You too?
a few. Oh, yeah. I mean, not by name, but, you know.
Yes, I understand.
Exactly. And he just captured what it was to live in New Jersey. And it was so dead on perfect.
Okay, let me go back to baseball.
All right.
The whole bunch of people who are not getting into the Hall of Fame.
Right.
Forget about Pete Rose. Talking about Bobby Bonds.
Right.
Talking about others.
Barry Bonds.
Excuse me, thank you. I just dated myself.
I've made that mistake a number of times.
Barry Bonds.
Barry Bonds.
I'm talking about A-Rod. I don't know what's going on there.
Never
I'm talking
happened.
about Roger Clemens.
Right.
Never happened?
I don't think so.
These were the greatest players of all time. Steroids, that's it. You're out.
The rules give you a prescribed period to be voted in. Their totals are edging up a little bit, but I don't know that they will edge up to that 75% threshold that by the time their eligibility to be voted. Then they go to the old, to a different set of voters, a smaller subset of voters in Cooperstown. It's unlikely. It's unlikely.
Do you have a vote?
No, I do not.
If you had, would you vote him in?
I'd have to say no.
No.
No. I mean, we know what the tests were, and what the results were, and what the rules were. No.
Got it. How about this one? Football. Outside the Lines has done great work in the area of head injuries in football. Right? We have a son who's actually playing football.
How old is he?
14.
Are you comfortable with that?
No.
Okay.
No. We'll talk about that another time, but
All right.
I lost that discussion.
All right.
Could have banned him from doing it, but
No.
didn't. I saw his helmet the other day. It was big and packed, and I was praying that it would protect him enough. You're against the game, aren't you?
I'm not against the game.
You're against how, well, you're very concerned about the injuries.
We've done a lot of reporting on the science.
The best stuff.
And what we know and what we don't know. It's like the Don Rumsfeld conundrum, the unknown unknowns. The science has not been treated gently over the years. Finally, I think all the authorities in the sport, the leagues, college, and doctors are on the same page. But an increasing number of people who know what they're talking about say that you shouldn't be playing tackle football until you're in high school. And you see culturally in other parts of the country, from where you and I are sitting, ages 5, 6, and 7, they pad them up. It's not prudent. It just isn't.
Yeah. How about this? Several minutes left. Let's try this. I'll try to cover as many topics as possible. Should we be paying college athletes who are making big money for their schools?
Absolutely. They deserve to have...
That's a yes from you?
That's a yes. That's a yes. It's just, first, when the right judge gets the right petition written the right way, this is all going to get blown up. And the NCAA is a voluntary institution. Look, there are billions of dollars at stake. There are coaches making over $10 million a year, coaching packages.
That's even without the deal from the sneaker company.
Well, you know what? Which almost pale in comparison to just what the alumni are putting. This is private money for the most part. It's not all public money.
Right.
But it's out there. The TV money is astronomical. And the kids, the young adults, they are the product.
Pay athletes?
I think you have to. Now, you open a Pandora's box. Can you pay just that sport? What about the so-called non-revenue sports? But it has to be addressed, and at a level beyond where they're willing to go right now.
It's interesting. That's the kind of stuff you've looked at for years.
Yeah.
And when you were teaching...
My thinking has evolved on this.
What do you mean?
Oh, I'd say 20 years ago, amateur sports, the value of an education. And education, nothing's more important to me than seeing someone get an education. But colleges are willingly recruiting kids, especially in basketball, knowing they're only going to be there a year or two. And it's a deal that everyone knows what the deal is.
There's so many other things I want to talk about that, but I want to try this one. Sports journalism
Right.
changed dramatically because of a million reasons. Biggest is?
There are more people out there with access and the ability, a lot of smart people doing things and platforms, and you just don't have to be on ESPN. I mean, you can sit there and upload your own. There's some great reporting being done.
Hold on. The digital thing, night and day from when you started in terms of the
gosh.
ability to deliver a product?
You could work weeks on a story. Hey, we're going to hold that for a week from Sunday. We got that story. Give it to the desk. We got to tweet it now.
What about the editing process? Listen,
that's very tough.
He's not going to tell you this, but Bob Ley started at Suburban Cable, TV3,
Right.
70s.
76.
76.
Right.
I was a little after that. I was
right.
with that crew as well, with Matt Lockham, with a great team.
Just saw him
Bruce
this week.
Beck.
Yes, I worked
Bruce
with both
Beck over
those
at
guys.
NBC.
Right.
The best guys ever.
Right.
Look at the editing process. We're sitting in the room. Not that I was a great editor. Trust me, I wasn't. I had somebody to press the buttons. But I'm thinking they're cutting it down to a minute and 20 story. Where's the editing now? Where's the vetting? Where are the gatekeepers?
Yeah. That is an issue. Speed versus accuracy. Fairness. That's the big push-pull on a daily basis. But the metrics by which so many people are judged are clicks, follows, retweets, likes, and that happens.
What are you telling your students now? That should be the metrics,
No.
or in fact some higher, different standard?
The basics matter, but you're going to have to adapt to the reality of the marketplace. And so, yes, editors are more important than ever, and what's scary at a lot of places, they are fewer than ever.
What do you
Because
mean?
Cutbacks, print, even in some digital enterprises, yeah.
You gonna miss this?
There'll be days I'll miss it like a son of a gun. But I'm at peace, but I talk to people who've been out. You know, you go through the 3, 4, 5 stages. But I know there are so many good people, especially where I work, who are going to carry on. They'll let me down. They're not going to let me down, I know.
Before I let you out of there, the most important aspect of how ESPN has impacted not just sports culture, but our culture as a society.
Wow. I think we had a hand in reality of the sports entertainment industry. It used to be just games. Now it's a sports entertainment industry, and I'm proudest of the fact that we are a cultural identity. You can't write the story of the United States in the last 40 or 50 years without there being a chapter on it. A lot of networks have viewers. Only one network has fans.
ESPN, I'll tell you what, I don't know what I do in the mornings, working out in the gym. And yes, we listen to news. We do all that. Of course, we check NJTV News every morning as well.
You check your portfolio, too, I know.
I know. Listen,
You
money, who cares about, never
Yeah.
leave that alone. But without ESPN, I'm not sure what I do. Listen, Bob Ley is, for 40 years, has been doing great work at ESPN, outside the lines. Before that, a lot of other works, work on location, everywhere else. And now they're doing a master class at Seton Hall University, and I look forward to seeing you up on campus, my friend.
You, too.
Well done.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Adubato. That's Bob Ley, and that's why we have a great show.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 30 years of broadcast excellence.
Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by Hackensack Meridian Health,
Seton Hall University, Valley Bank,
NJM Insurance Group, NJ Best, New Jersey's 529 College Savings Plan,
the New Jersey Economic Development Authority,
and by Fedway Associates. Promotional support provided by
Tap Into TV,
and by New Jersey Monthly. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.